Hi guys, so Beyond the Breakers with Brendon. Next episode, let's talk about wind. Wind is awesome because it can make your paddle experience the best, but it also can make it the worst. So understanding what the wind does is so important to safe, effective, efficient paddling. We can find out what the national wind is doing by quite simply looking on a basic app or watching the 10 o'clock news, and it'll tell you which direction it is coming from. Whenever we talk about the wind, it's always the direction it's coming from and the direction it's going to. But it's hard to kind of envisage because you can't see it. So the best way I explain wind is to compare it, because the flow dynamics of wind is exactly the same as the flow dynamics of water. So understanding, if you think about it as in water terms, what it means. So let's say, for example, there's a wind coming from the south going to the north. Now, if there's nothing in its way, that flow of air is consistent and in one direction. A bit like a really big river, a really big open river where there's nothing in its way and everything is just flowing down. It's consistently flowing, not getting any faster, not getting any slower. It's just one consistent flow. If you suddenly imagine that river full of rocks, suddenly rapids are formed, and all that flow isn't going in the same direction anymore, because when it hits a rock, the other side of the rock, it might be flowing back the other way in an eddy. It might hit a stopper. Between two rocks, it will get faster because it's pinched. So if you think of wind like water and the effects, that big wind coming from the south going to the north, as soon as it hits the land, it gets thrown around and does other stuff. So this is why you can paddle with the wind on your back and it's going so well. And then you get to a headland and it's suddenly in your face, really strong. And you fight your way through that and you get round the headland and suddenly it's on your back again. Well, that can happen because of many, many factors. And it's understanding that that is totally different, probably, to what the national wind has said. So when I paddle, I look to see what the national winds directions are doing, but then I need to see what the local winds are doing. If wind is hitting land, a bit like water hitting rocks, it will go in other directions. It will always fill the gaps. There's always air movement filling those gaps. There will never be a void of that air movement. And understanding that helps you to get around headlands and understand your planning and journeys along a coastline, for example. But there are also other factors. So if I know it's a windy day nationally, but I also know then the sun is shining all day on the area where I'm paddling, that is going to create even more local winds. So for example, if you're paddling and there's a nice big wheat field, let's say, on the land, that is going to heat up with that sun. And as soon as it starts to heat up, then that heat rises. The moment that heat starts to rise, air is sucked in it to fill the gap that rising air is created. And all of a sudden you've got local winds. So you might have a national wind going one way that's hitting cliffs and then forks and goes both ways, whereas you might then also have local winds moving air along valleys because of this rise in heat. And that goes both ways for the land and the sea. So that's probably a talk for another day about why that changes. So offshore winds, onshore winds, why it changes through the course of the day when it's a sunny day. But today is just looking at winds and understanding. The big point of this message is to understand that there are national winds and then there are local winds. And local winds are what normally causes a problem, where one minute you've got the wind in your face and then wind on your back, then wind on your face, wind on your back as you're paddling. Hopefully that gets you thinking about it. If you ever booked me as a speaker, Beyond the Breakers with Brendon, this is just one of the sort of things that I have a chat about and give you an amazing stories to give examples of when I've experienced this. For example, paddling around the Mull of Kintyre, which is brutal for its winds because of the pinch point between Northern Ireland and Scotland, and this big finger of land that comes out, which is the Mull of Kintyre, the wind there is crazy and can be going in kind of 4 directions all at the same time. Just one of the many stories I can bring, practical stories about talking about the subject, in this case, wind.